Hi, I'm Joel Marowitz. Welcome to my course. You've probably asked yourself, what am I going to get for this course? What am I taking this course for? I think you're going to get a lot out of it because it's about finding your identity as an artist and as a human being who is interested in the world around you. You can come with anything that you want to make a photograph. You can have your smartphone or a real camera. I would prefer that you used a real camera so that you weren't thinking about making a phone call while you're making photographs or watching a little video on the internet. You don't have to have a Leica camera to make photographs. But something that feels like a photographic instrument in your hand gives you a kind of authority. There's a quality of dignity to it. There's a sense of the adventure of photography because once you have a camera in your hand, you have a license to see. And seeing is what photography is all about. You learn about yourself and you learn about the world around you. Photography has taught me, in the 55 years I've been making photographs, everything I know about the world around me and about myself. When I began, I didn't even have a camera. I was an art director at a small agency in New York, and I had designed a little brochure, and my boss hired a photographer to make the photographs for the brochure. And I spent an hour and a half watching this photographer work. I didn't know at the time that he was Robert Frank, one of the most important photographers of the 20th century. But in that hour and a half, the things that he did were so astonishing to me, as simple as they were, that when I left the location and went out on the street, the world was alive to me in a way that I had never experienced before. Every gesture, every incident on the street seemed to have meaning. And by the time I made my way back to my office, I realized I had to quit my job and follow that immediate instinct I had of wanting to be a photographer and wanting to see the way the world showed itself to me. And when I told my boss, Harry, I'm going to quit because I need to be a photographer, he said, do you have a camera? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, well, you need a camera to make photographs. And he loaned me his Pentax camera. And it was the start of a 50-year journey to find my identity and my passion. And you're at the beginning of a journey of your own right now. So come with me and let's see what we can discover. I remember being a young photographer and having some insecurities about how the work is developing. And I just want to say to you that that's part of the game. When you're starting out, or when you're trying to raise the level of your game as an artist, there's always some doubt. I want to urge you to accept that and move ahead, because the photographs are the touchstones that keep giving you information and confidence. And part of the way this course will develop will be to help you to arrive at a kind of confidence and magnitude, a way of expressing yourself through photography, because it's an incredible medium for reflecting the power of your ideas and your observations. Photography is about looking at the world and seeing in the world just the pieces of it that make you feel like you're connected to it. It's not the kind of humdrum stuff all around you. It's those moments of instinct and observation and recognition. It really is about awareness. So have no doubts. You're a conscious, thinking person. you have passions and feelings about things. Trust that and go for it. Don't hesitate, because in photography, hesitation is loss. And every picture you lose is like a wound. I know. I've lost a few myself, and I've learned from those. So have the confidence, just try anything. So what I'm really saying to you is instinct and impulse. As soon as it arises, react, do it, go for the picture. Don't think too much. Let the intuitive, physical part of your being, your body and your brain, join in that moment, and you'll make a photograph of something that is disappearing right in front of you. Because that's what photography does. It tears a little piece of time out of the whole flow of time. And that piece is identified just with you. You are so lucky to be living in this time. This is a time where photography books are abundant. When I began photographing 55 years ago, photography wasn't an art form that was so recognized and so abundant as it is today. I only had 3 books to look at, and I didn't even know about them at the beginning. They came to me in the course of 1 year. They were American Photographs by Walker Evans, this incredible book by Cartier-Bresson, The Decisive Moment, and this book, The Americans by Robert Frank, which was a life-changing experience for me. But I'm bringing this up because it's important to have books around, to have the literature of photography available to you. Not so much that you could copy or steal from these artists, but that you could find in their work the same impulses that you have. They developed them. They became artists of great significance, and they were able to bring their work together in a book, and these books have become part of the history of the medium that we're also involved in. But when you look at these books, it's like entering a dream. All of the experiences, the locations, the identities of artists that they've photographed or of actions that they've seen, these are available to you as a way of finding a comparison between your impulses and theirs. Like I say, it's not so much about making photographs that look like theirs, but about having human instincts, responses to a kind of generosity of experience that the world offers. And in the pages of these books, there are untold poems. Anyone that you open can take you in to the way a photographer had the good sense to stop at that moment in the middle of an ordinary street or a landscape or, by the seaside, and just pause for a moment and let the indwelling experience come to them. I'm here now in this place. This is what it looks like. And the invitation to enter that moment, the photographic moment, is available to you by looking throughout these resources. This is a book that I made, my very first book, Cape Light. And it's been a constant resource. I go back and look at it, surprisingly, at my own book, year after year, because it gives me the courage again to keep going forward and pushing beyond the things that I learned when I made these photographs. And I think for all of you, the references that come up out of these books are part of the encouragement that you get. You'll have encouragement from me in the course, but I think you need to go and read the poems of all the photographers from the last 150 years, and you'll find them in books everywhere. And for those of you interested in street photography, this is a book that I've worked on with my co-author, Colin Westerbeck, for 25 years. And it's a book that really expresses what it's like to be out in the everyday, ordinary streets of any city in the world and finding on those places your image, your counterpart in some way, your sense of what's of worth or value to you at any given moment in the day, because the streets are an abundant and astonishingly surprising place to be. Ordinary life isn't ordinary. When you put a frame around a moment, you separate it from everything else, and it's a concentrated essence of who you are. Having books is having an asset that is a library of ideas, photographs that can inspire you and encourage you to go out and search on your own for your qualities, for the things that make you feel that your instincts are valid and valuable to you. I've used books, really my whole life as a photographer. I've used them as a resource to inspire me. There are going to be days when you feel like I've got nothing to say and it's boring and I can't go out. You'll have a lot of excuses. Everybody does. And sometimes when you feel that way and you pick up a book, it charges you with that desire again. I want to go out and do the same thing. And I can tell you that a photographer like Cartier-Bresson, great decisive moment. I mean, I could almost open any page here, but look at this. Here's a spread of 4 different photographs. I mean, I open a book like this, and there are 4 pictures here in almost all cases, there are children in these pictures, which is interesting because children are a great subject. You can observe them. They're probably not going to, pay much attention to you. It allows you to get in close and intimate and see things. But, look at a picture like this, and you say, how did he make that? How did he know to make that? He was probably caught by the uncertain arrangement of windows. There's no regularity here. I don't know who decided to punch holes in the building like that and put windows in, but it's a fantastic thing. And Bresson thought, wow, this is a great background. I'm going to hang out here for a while. And then he noticed that there were kids playing. So he moved within the range of where the kids were because they're not going to be bothered, with his presence nearby them. So he could observe the kids and this wall behind him. Both of them came together to make a kind of photographic space. And then, because he was there waiting, a man comes walking through, and the man has a hat on and a suit jacket, and he's got a belly, and he's walking through this playground of kids. And Bresson sees the photograph. First, there was the inspiration to stop there because of the way the building looked. Then there was the sighting of the kids, and Bresson finds his way into position, and then this man enters. And a photograph appeared for him, just because his instinct said, stand here a while, pay a little attention here. And look at how these 4 pictures look on a spread. I mention this to you because we live in a time now when anybody can make a book out of their work. And I have to say, when I began as a photographer, my dream, after seeing Robert Frank's book, The Americans, my dream was that someday I'll have my photographs in a book. It wasn't about an exhibition or about selling anything. It was about making a body of work come together in book form that would express my feelings about the world, my personal poetry, my sense of what's valuable. And so looking at books gives you an opportunity to see the way other people put pictures together, because pictures together are like music. or they're like lines of poetry on a page, or they're like literature. You put things together and you get some very interesting relationship surprises. I mean, look at this. Bresson walks along a street and he sees a man sleeping against he has a little fruit stand here. And Bresson stops to make the picture because not only is the man sleeping, but on the wall, someone has drawn a caricature in chalk. And Bresson sees that the man and his caricature look exactly alike. And he stands there, right in front of the sleeping man, and he makes this picture. This is the kind of thing that you can take in as inspiration and say, yeah, I'll just get as close to people as I can to see if I can find something interesting. And then when the time comes to put the book together, on this page, he puts a still life of fruit in a box that's covered with a little bit of a screen so the flies wouldn't get on the fruit. But he makes a still life on the street, and he makes a sleeping man picture on the street, and they come together as a new kind of poetry. So I believe that books give you a kind of inspiration, and we all need inspiration, but they give you an inspiration to search in the world for the kinds of connections, you to a single moment, but the interconnectedness of putting pictures together in a way that describe only your sensibility. And that's what this course is all about. Keeping you in touch with your sensibility so that you feel how to strengthen it by making photographs that come to you only through your curiosity. Take, for example, someone like Diane Arbus, who was a photographer mostly doing portraits of people. Here, Diane Arbus has photographed twins. So what's the first thing we think about with twins? Oh, they look alike, they're twins. Oh, they dress alike, they're twins. But she's sharper than that. This photograph of these lookalikes show just how much they do not look alike, even though they're twins. And that quirky aspect of who they are was what was so intriguing to her. And she was an interesting photographer in that when she was curious about somebody, she didn't just go sneak up to them and take their picture and run away. She entered their space, their life. She was able to show them that she was interested enough in their specialness that when she expressed that, either physically or through words, they were able to release themselves and free themselves to give her their mystery. Because photographs describe the mystery of others. And I think that portraiture is one of those connective moments between human beings, between the artist and whoever he or she chooses to make the subject, that reveals a lot about the person making the photograph as well as the person who is being photographed. And really, for most of you, you'll learn a lot if you start to photograph the people around you, not just for family album snaps, but to make photographs that show the mystery, the essential qualities, the tenderness, the physical beauty, the magic that people have when they express themselves and when they reveal themselves to you. This is part of the art of photography, is how to work with your human capacities and communicate them to other people so that they in turn yield themselves up to you. You can do this, and it's incredibly rewarding. I would say, if you're going to buy any book, first, buy The Americans. It is a lesson in looking not only at individuals, but at looking at a whole culture. A young Swiss photographer comes to America. He finds it fascinating. He tours around the country, and he makes this book, which is considered the single greatest poem, photographic poem of the 20th century. I just opened the book a few minutes ago, and I came across this picture. And it's probably not the greatest picture in the book, but it's a terrific example of just walking along the street and suddenly seeing someone who's out of place, a cowboy in New York City. And Robert Frank has the instinct and takes pleasure at the same time from pausing for a moment in his passage and just going, that's all. It takes just that. And although it seems like a simple picture, it carries a lot of meaning to it. And when you come across a picture like this on a day when you feel dull and you don't feel like going out, and you look at the picture, it's a reminder that, yeah, you can just walk down the street and you might see someone leaning against a garbage can, rolling a cigarette, and suddenly it becomes important to you. So out of nothing, out of ordinary everyday life, beauty and significance can be found. This is my book, my first book, Cape Light. I made it with an 8x10 view camera, color work. And just as I said about Robert Frank, sometimes you can stop in front of what seems like the most banal, ordinary thing in the world, laundry blowing on a line. So why did I stop to look at that? Why did I think it was worth a picture? I don't have to speculate, as I do on Robert Frank and Cartier-Bresson. I can tell you, because I was there. I walked along, and I heard this flapping sound, like that, and I stop, and I look, and I see sheets and towels blowing on a line, and I think, this is the dumbest thing. Who would want, if I said to one of my friends, hey, today I took a picture of laundry, they would say, Joel. But I have to tell you, I stood there and I watched the way color was flowing in front of me. And I thought it was magical. And with the view camera, you see things upside down. So when I set my camera up, this is what I saw. And it became transcendent. It was bigger than laundry blowing on a line. It was about wind and sunlight and color. And it gave me a kind of revelation that something as simple and mundane as laundry on a line could be transformed into a little essay on time and light and color and air. I mean, elemental qualities and something as simple as sheets and towels. It's really all there waiting for you. All you have to have is appetite and imagination, and take yourself out of the house and go for a walk in the world and see what comes your way. Let's talk about looking at pictures and talking about pictures. So one of the most difficult things many people feel is how to talk about a photograph. What do you say? That's nice, that's beautiful, that's pretty. That isn't enough. Photographs are rich with information and potential. Not stories in a conventional narrative way, but stories of instantaneous vision, of being present and ready when something happens. For example, here's a photograph made in Paris. This photograph was only one picture. There wasn't time for another shot. I was walking on a street. I see a crowd. I feel the energy of the crowd. I move toward it. And there in front of me, on the street, is a man fallen on the sidewalk and unconscious. And at the very same time, that I see the guy on the ground. I see a man with a hammer stepping over the guy and walking somewhere. And it looks, for all the world, as if this guy had just bludgeoned him with the hammer and knocked him to the ground. But of course, it didn't happen like that. It was just a man had fallen, and the character with the hammer is going to work someplace. And all around them are people, a guy on a bicycle turning behind his back, a guy who's walking, he's looking off to the side. And all these other people by the bus, they're all looking. Not one person is going over to help the guy on the ground. So what's the story here? The interaction between the guy on the ground and the man with the hammer and the kind of possible story, did he knock him down? Or the larger story, which is, why are all these people not helping that man? Why is it that they're paralyzed and they aren't going to the defense or the aid of this fallen guy? So several things happen all at once in a photograph. And part of the joy of making images is that they are flexible. They can be read in singular ways as individual heads in a picture, and they can be read in global ways as the meanings about culture and society and the time you live in. The morality of the time is actually involved in the reading of this picture. So think about photography as being a flexible medium that expresses dramatic content, but also has the potential to read your emotions and the sense of what time you live in. It's a very elastic and expansive and expressive medium. You know, people often say, how do you make a funny picture? And I think, well, I don't know how to make a funny picture. The funny pictures happen. So, for example, I was at the edge of the Grand Canyon, and I'm walking along, and suddenly I see this woman weaving herself into the railings over the Grand Canyon, where people aren't supposed to go because they're afraid they're going to fall only 4,000 feet to the bottom. And this crazy lady is doing that with her pocketbook hanging off at the same time. So why? People do the most unexpected things. And really, the witness is we with a camera. We photographers who are carrying a camera at the ready, we comment on the absurdities of ordinary life, of these crazy doings that other human beings get involved in. And often you can come up with an incredibly funny picture. Here's a picture that could be funny or not, depends on your point of view. But I was walking down the street in Manhattan, in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, and this is what I see. Some guy in front of a window suddenly decides to drop his pants and pose and see how good he looks in the mirror. And along the street comes another guy who says, huh, what? And it's that kind of astonishment that makes for a photograph. But there's more in it. If you look carefully, and this comes from being a New Yorker and living with races and religions of all colors and beliefs. In the background, it says lilac chocolates. And I'm looking at that guy's ass, and all I can think of is, how fortunate am I that these connections come up in a picture? That's not something you always want to say, but in fact, it's part of the joke. And really, New York humor makes jokes at everybody else's expense all the time, whether it's your religion or your color or whatever it is you believe in. There's a kind of tough New York humor that accepts all of that craziness. Look at this. Look at this. I was in Puerto Rico doing an advertising campaign, and I was walking through a small square, and as I was walking through, a guy on a bicycle, on a unicycle, a guy on a unicycle comes pedaling by, and he's got probably 8 feet of flowers and balloons on his head, all kinds of colors. And as he's biking by, he's getting his balance, as you do on a unicycle. And I notice that his arm is stretched out the same way that the statue's arm is stretched out. It happens in a split second and it's gone. The statue is there forever, but the guy with the flowers was gone in 20 seconds. He was out of reach. When you carry a camera with you all the time, it's as if it's an invitation for surprises to happen. I was walking down the street in Mexico. I turned the corner into a little garden, and what I see is this. A boy lying on the ground in the garden with a stick, which he probably made into a kind of sword. You know, it's got a long pointy part and it's got a little cross handle and everything. But seen as it is in this photograph, he's lying there sort of with a cross on him. So there are momentary parallels to, the history of religious painting there, the epiphanies and the visions that people have had. And yet it was a totally innocent thing of a kid lying on the ground with his sword. But the reading is different. And I think part of photography's power and its magic is that there are many ways of interpreting the same thing. There's always a degree of ambiguity. We describe everything that's in the frame, and yet we're uncertain as to the meaning. And it's in that little space of ambiguity that photography gains a lot of power. So keep that in mind when you're out there, that it looks like one thing, but it may resonate and mean something else when you have it printed on a piece of paper and you can hold in your hands. This is 57th and 5th in New York City. If I hang on this corner for a while, I'm going to see something. People are coming this way and that way, and there's all kinds of interesting things. So you hang out on a corner, and the boredom that you feel goes away. Just goes away because you're watching interesting things happen, or you're just watching ordinary things happen, but something out of the ordinary just comes along and suddenly you see it. Look at that, quick. Oh, got him in the air, got him in the air. Let's see, there he is. He's just ready to take off. You pay attention to the next thing that calls your attention. It's like, it could be down there, it could be something in the sky. Just stay connected to what's around you and you'll be nourished again and again. I've been asked so many times, how do you work on the street? I'm afraid to work on the street. I'm too shy. I can't take pictures of strangers because I shouldn't really be taking their image. It's like some kind of mythic fear that people have. My feeling about the street and street photography is that the street is ours. It's a public space. And once you enter a public space, everyone and everything in the space is free game. So how do you go about making a street photograph? First of all, you have to have an appetite. The street is chaos. If you're comfortable in chaos, you'll find your way. My feeling is, when you're on the street, it's important to be able to see all over the frame. You own the territory that you see when you look in the viewfinder of your camera. I think among the most interesting things in street photography is making connections between things that are not related. Because when you put the frame around them, you make the relationship. You make a photograph. You don't take a picture. They're two different levels of thinking. So what constitutes an interesting street photograph? It's really up to you. But if you have a sense of the time that you're living in, if you're aware of the way clothing and style looks, if the light on the street sends shivers down your spine, you're starting to be in the zone. And then everything becomes interesting. You're walking down the street and suddenly you see a beautiful woman coming at you, dressed in fur, and the sunlight is sparkling in the fur. At the very same moment, two guys get off a truck carrying a 6-foot piece of plate glass that they're going to deliver and install in the storefront. And you see the guys with the plate glass and the woman in the fur coat, and then suddenly, here comes a messenger on a bicycle. And he's cruising in and out of the street, and you think, oh, if I just move here a little bit, the messenger is going to be seen right behind the guys carrying the plate glass window and the woman in the fur coat. These unconnected things come together only because you're conscious that the street is yours. You own that territory and everything in it. So being alert to the unexpected is part of the great joy of being on the street. And really, photography is a very optimistic sport. You press that button and you're saying, yes, yes, I saw that. Yes, I want that. Yes to life. And then when you look at your photographs later on, and we'll talk more about editing and how you put pictures together for a show or a book at some other time. But when you assemble your photographs, you look at your contact sheet or your images in Lightroom or on screen, you'll begin to see that during the course of that day, you were saying yes to a lot of different things. But when you add them up, those different photographs give you a sense of your identity. And your identity as an artist, a photographer artist, is the most important thing you can get from this course. Because really, every one of you is capable of making a work of art. You just have to be open to your own intuition and your instincts when you're out on the street, and you will find your way. You see, I made a portrait of this woman here, but up above her head was the hand. And the hand was the same color as sort of her hair and her clothing. So I made a kind of combination. She didn't know I was really taking her picture. She might have been a little bit aware. But I'm building not just a portrait, but a portrait and an environmental thing. So if you look not just at the object, but if you look at the object and what's around you, you can find an interesting combination of things. So stay alert and build the frame. You don't want to just take a picture, you want to make the picture. That's where your intelligence comes in. When you bring things together in the frame, you're making art. You're an artist photographer. Just remember, you can do that. When do I know how to take a photograph? Have you ever walked along a street in Paris and suddenly across your path comes the sweet smell of baking, butter and sugar, and you can smell the croissant in the air. And then you take another step and there's no sweet smell. To me, that zone in the doorway, when I got the fragrance of the fresh baked croissant and I thought, oh, I want that. That's photography. You step into a space, something happens, you want it, you raise the camera, the space and the moment is gone. That's being in the moment, in the zone, in consciousness, being wide awake with a camera in your hand. And no matter where you are, whether you're walking in the countryside or the woods or in a big city, that intuition about now I smell that fragrance, now I feel alive, that's when you make a photograph. There are so many times that I've been on the street and I'm thinking, if they would only go that way, and I think, how can I get them over there? And I put my body in the way. And as soon as you put your body in the way, the other person has an automatic reflex because they're on the street too, and they know you don't want to bump into anybody. So people are constantly moving to avoid contact. So these controls are really not totally in our hands, but we can manage certain things, you know. And I'll tell you, there is something. This is absolutely important to remember. One of the great fears that everyone has is that if they take a picture of someone on the street, that person's going to be insulted, and they're going to maybe attack you and say, "Don't take my picture." But the fact is, a simple smile, the good humor of your pleasure on the street, because for me, it's a great pleasure. So if you're on the street and everything you see when you're taking pictures makes you smile, you're already a softer, more approachable, more vulnerable, more human person, and people won't feel negative. But if you're standing there with a 200-meter telephoto lens and you're doing this at somebody and they catch sight of you, they're going to be angry. They're going to say, "Hey, get out of my way." So being quick, being happy and excited about it, sends off an aura of, oh, this person's okay. I don't have anything to worry about. There's no fear about that person stealing my soul. So think about that. Intuition, being positive, a great sense of humor, being in the right place at the right time. Always have your camera lens cap off and the camera turned on. Touch the button so that it's always ready to shoot. All these levels of consciousness are part of your basic preparation for being a photographer out on the street, but also for just being a good human being. I would like to do a portrait of you because of the rose in your tie. And just how you look today. You are so fantastically dressed. Do you mind if I stand in your space like this? No. Okay, great. Beautiful. I can even come in really close. Give me that look right into the camera. Yeah. Powerful. What a powerful picture. You see, it's that easy. You can stop a stranger on the street and say, "You're really beautiful. Can I make a photograph of you?" And they just give in. They say, "Sure. If you love me this much, take my picture." You know, there are a lot of subjects that people think are off limits. You shouldn't photograph people with infirmities or people who are hurt. Here's a photograph. I'm walking down the street and I see a guy carrying flowers. This is from one of my wildflower book pictures. And I walk up, you know, because I'm trying to get in position. And at the very moment I get near the guy, this woman with this big bandage across her nose appears next to him in the crowd. So I make a photograph of him. Now, I know a lot of people say, "Oh, no, but she's, you know, look how she looks and everything." It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And in a way, photographing people with infirmities or with injuries or something else that's wrong is acknowledging their existence. It isn't about saying, poor them, or I shouldn't photograph them. One has to be humble enough to recognize that we're all humans and we come in every shape and size and color, and we're whole or we're part or something happens. But don't be afraid of following your instinct. You're not making fun of anybody. You're telling it like it is. This is what the world looks like, and these are the way people interact. And so I believe that everyone is fair game. As long as you're not trying to take advantage or be cold-hearted or cruel, unless that suits you. And if that's your subject, you could probably make something out of that too. But I'm saying that from a humanistic point of view, the sweetness of photography is its capacity to embrace everybody in every kind of situation and to make works that come from your heart. And that way, what you say through your pictures to the world at large is that you are warm-hearted and generous and sympathetic and open and vulnerable. When I was a kid growing up in the Bronx, in a real working class, tough neighborhood, my father, who was a comedian, a professional boxer, a salesman, a tap dancer, my father was an athletic man. He taught me to protect myself when I was a kid so that I wouldn't get hurt in street rumbles and things like that. But he also taught me how to look at life in front of me. Because he always said, Joel, look at that. Watch this. And whenever he pointed something out, like watch this, something would always happen. Somebody would slip on the banana peel, or they'd bump into a pole, or they'd stop and have a conversation with somebody and they'd wrestle with each other a little bit. He always seemed to have an idea of what might happen. And by pointing it out to me and saying, watch this, I learned to read the street. And he also taught me, when he was teaching me how to protect myself, he taught me how to bob and weave and feint so that somebody would look somewhere else and then you could throw a shot at them. So in a way, being a photographer came to me very naturally out of a kind of childhood of awareness and protection and understanding that the world repeated itself over and over and over again. People have been walking into doors or falling off of steps or, making eye contact or love or fighting. People do the same things all the time. And if you understand that, you can watch the world with a sense of the possibility that these things are going to happen. You can predict small movements, gestures, actions. And that way, you're always ahead of the game a little bit. You're ready to step into the right space and be near enough so when that event happens, you're there. How is it when you look at the work of someone like the master Henri Cartier-Bresson? How is it that he was always in the right place at the right time? His pictures are a testimony to the fact that Bresson always understood, anticipated, predicted, and arrived just where he should be when the moment happened. So I think that all of you have this capacity for understanding and for knowing how to raise your desires up in such a way that you will make the photographs that you think you've only seen in magazines for other people, but really you can do this too. Okay, I'm going to show you this picture here. What's going on there? I was going down the street and I saw a big puff of smoke come up. Now, let me say, part of the inspiring moments on a daily basis of photography are when something signals you, a puff of smoke, the way a big truck comes by, a fire engine, or some crazy outfit comes by in the street. Anything that says, hello, I'm talking to you, pay attention. This is the basic act of photography, paying attention. In this case, the puff of smoke coming up out of the sewer system of New York. Down below, they have all the gas lines and the energies for all the big skyscrapers. They always let smoke out in the cold weather. I saw that puff of smoke and I moved towards it because I saw it as a screen in the middle of the street on which people's shadows were being projected. And just as I walked up to it, a couple wearing matched camel coats appears on the screen, and next to them, right next to them, are another two people, also in camel coats, and imprinted on their backs are shadows of other people. And this happened for a split second, which is the time of photography, right? The little dial on top says 1,000th of a second. That means in 1 second you could take 1,000 pictures, but you've only taken the one that really counted, and that's the one that counted. This picture has a kind of twinning quality, a kind of serendipity, a kind of nothing major is happening, but the fact that these two small incidents appeared together in a puff of smoke is like a magician's trick. Poof, now you see it. Photography happens that fast, right in front of your eyes. You know how the magician shows you his trick? He does this, and then you see it. Well, that's photography. It shows itself to you, and only if you're quick enough to see it can you make magic out of it. Because really, that's who you are. You're a magician with a camera. So stay on your toes, follow your instinct. When you see something happening out there and you feel the urge to go to it, don't wait. You can see why it's interesting to stand on a busy corner in any city in the world. All you got to do is stand there for 15 minutes, and you'll be so excited by what you see because you'll start to read the space. And if you read the space, if you can say what you're seeing to yourself, oh, I see this hot dog stand over here. Here are people crossing the street this way. Here are two guys, one guy's in a red shirt. If you can say it, you can see the street come alive, and something will come up that's just intended for you. It makes sense to you. Oh. Those two little girls with blue pom-poms and the rabbi father, and behind them is an old man doddering along. So in the moment, it's youth and age. That's an idea, right? Because sometimes we need to express the difference between youth and age. So it arose as just a brief little touch, like a little brushstroke of possibility. But you have to think like that when you're on the street. You have to think about these combinations that you're putting together. That way, if you're thinking about it, you can then begin to address it as a subject for you. And maybe you start to make a lot of pictures about youth and age. Interesting. Look at this. Intimate things happen in public all the time. The kisses, the caresses, the angers, the joys, the parenting, it all happens right in front of us, in the public space. All we have to do is anticipate it or be willing to look at it and get close to it. You know, you can be standing on a street corner, waiting for the light to change, and you look to the side, and out of the corner of your eye, you see a couple standing there speaking intimately. And just at that moment, the man reaches up to the woman's face to kind of move a lock of hair that's fallen on her face. And as he goes to move her hair, she might turn her head into his palm and just brush her lips against his palm. That's the photograph. And it only happens because you were standing right in their intimate space, and they don't see you because you're invisible. And you catch that moment of that little tender kiss. That's the photographic moment. This picture of a kiss is just a kiss, but it happens all the time, and I'm such a sucker for it. Anytime I see people kissing on the street or doing something affectionate, it's a reward for me to make a photograph of it. It's like saying, again, yes, life is positive, life is rich and full, and life repeats itself with every variation of the kiss. And I think it's an uplifting experience to see human interaction that has a kind of joyousness to it. That's photography for me. Beautiful. Oh. Nice. Sometimes it's a little detail. Sometimes it's the way someone, like that woman who was holding her hands, or sometimes the way, look at that. It's just the way the mother and the daughter reached for their hands, a kind of unconscious but familiar gesture. But in that twist of the body and the little girl's hand coming up, a moment of poetry happens. So you have to look for the detail. Sometimes in a great big space, a small detail turns the thing around. And when you see that small detail, you can build a larger picture on the small detail. So consider the detail. I can't enter this space without getting those sense of the smell or the chills I have from the 9 months I spent down here. And this was pure destruction right here. This was just piles. Imagine 100 stories of building. Imagine if that building fell here. And to walk amidst the fallen members of that building, it was one of the most powerful experiences of my entire life. I didn't have a plan of what I wanted to do. All I knew is that when New York City was attacked, as a native New Yorker, I wanted to help in some way. But really, by the time people were allowed to come close to the site, all of the necessary jobs were taken. People who were moving steel, construction workers, engineers, all of those people who were doing the searching, those positions were filled. So what could a citizen, a normal, ordinary citizen do? I was lost. I didn't have an idea, but something happened to me while I was visiting the area in the immediate vicinity of the towers. I raised my camera, and a policewoman behind me said to me, "Hey, no photographs allowed, buddy. This is a crime scene." And I remember being shocked and thinking, wait a second, the crime scene's in there. This is the public space. You can't tell me not to raise my camera. I'm a citizen, you know? I have a right to raise my camera. So I started arguing with her, and I said, suppose I was the press. What would happen then? And she laughed in my face, and she said, the press, huh? Look over there. And I looked over there, and there was the press corps. Maybe a dozen video cameras with big booms and reporters, and they were all tied up with police tape. And I said, well, when are they going in? And she said, never. Mayor Giuliani said, this is off limits to photography, no photography allowed. And at that moment, the little light bulb, bing, went off in my mind, and I thought, no photography means no history. How could that be? How could a modern event of this scope go unphotographed because some mayor doesn't have the vision to understand that history has been made on his watch and he should follow through and record all of this? So I tried to convince him through some intermediaries. He wouldn't listen. And I thought, well, too bad. I'm going to figure this out myself. I want to make an archive. And in a way, I found, in a moment, I found my usefulness came from all the years I've had of editing photographs, mine and sometimes other people's for books that I did. And I knew my way around an archive, and I knew how to build an archive, and I thought, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll make the archive. I was working late at night, and right back there was a pile of rubble, like a hill, going up to the buildings. And I had to make the shot I wanted, I had to make from that point. But when I looked up there, there were 11 policemen sitting on chairs up there. And I thought, oh shit, that's my spot. What am I going to do? They're going to throw me out. So I walked all the way up the hill, and when I got to where the cops were, they were sitting on chairs. All the chairs had fallen out of the building. And I walked up and I sat down on somebody's lap. And I said, hey, you guys are in my spot. And they all got up and said, oh, wait a second, what are you doing? And I said, I'm the history photographer. I'm working for the Museum of the City of New York. I'm making a document about everything here. And they said, yeah, we got to do that. This is for our kids and for our grandchildren. We need the history. And I said, yeah, but the mayor says no photography allowed. And they said, screw the mayor. We need this for our history, and we're going to protect you. And from that day on, for the next 50 days, these 11 detectives from the arson explosion squad, they took care of me. Anytime some cop threw me out, they said, hey, he's with us, you know. It was fantastic. They saved my ass the whole time. And because of them, we now have a history of almost 9,000 photographs in the record of what happened in Ground Zero. So my point is, sometimes chance provides you with an opportunity to do something bigger than yourself, outside the scale and scope of your ambitions. But it's those moments that drive you. They allow you to become the person you can become. And that's the secret of any art form. If you reach out beyond what you think are your limits, you extend and expand yourself through whatever medium you choose, be it photography or music or dance, whatever it is, when you try something, you become the next version of yourself. And the problems that you have to solve to do this thing you've tried to do are the problems that enlarge your capacities. So it's a growth leap that you're capable of making. And you know, when 9/11 happened, I was 62 years old. And the work that I had to do really was for a much younger person. Because I was walking 2.5 miles in the morning and 2.5 miles back at night. I was carrying 40 pounds of equipment by myself, no assistance. And I spent 10, 12, 14 hours a day inside Ground Zero, walking around and around and around and up and down and in and out, usually adding another 10 miles a day. So I was walking, let's say, 15 miles a day, carrying 40 pounds of equipment in a dangerous place that was full of toxic chemicals and fumes. It was on fire, it was exploding, and it had sharp knives sticking up everywhere. And this 62-year-old guy was wandering around in there making photographs by myself. It was a kind of passion that I had that really consumed me. And really the benefit was that by doing this demanding work at my age, I felt young again. Photography and my commitment to doing this for the people of New York made me feel that same thrill I had when I started in 1962 as a 24-year-old kid. Photography was like food. I had to have it every day. And here I was again at 62 years of age, doing the same thing, going out there and seeing. So think about this. A project comes to you, whether it's something you decide on yourself because you love it, because it's the lake you grew up on, or it's the church you belong to, or it's the interested people on your block that you want to make a portrait of in the long term. Any kind of project that comes your way, if you go into it open-hearted with all of your energy, you'll find incredible things that will teach you, inspire you, carry you along, and ultimately shape the artist that you're capable of being. Most of the time, the tendency of photographers is to put something in the middle of the frame. It's easy that way, right? It's like shooting an arrow into the target. I certainly did that. I did it a lot when I was a young photographer because I wanted to get it. I wanted to capture the moment or the look or the gesture, the expression, the beauty, all of that. And pictures have a tendency to look like that, you know? It's an attractive woman, in this case, and I'm confronting her on the street, and she's sort of standing me off, and we have a little bit of a give and take together. But she's right in the middle of the frame, and it's not difficult to put something in the middle of the frame. That, in fact, is the easiest way of making a photograph. But I learned, because it doesn't come right away, I learned that you can spread that energy out all over the frame. Because if you make it interesting enough, somebody will pick it up and they will read all over the frame. They'll look from the center to the upper corner and down to the side and across to over there. They will follow the tune that you're playing inside the photograph. So you can make pictures that are more complex. For example, a picture like this. A picture like this came probably 10 years after I began. I was courageous enough at that point, and I was connected enough to my instrument to be able to disperse the energy out from the center and use many layered images to make the picture. There's the tiger in the window. There's the blind guy with his dog. There are 4 or 5 women whose feet are lined up in the picture doing this. There's a guy with a briefcase entering the sunlight from a shadowed area. And then there's the sky and the flags and the buildings. I was able to embrace everything on the street to try to describe the overall sensation of what it was to be alive in 1974 on the streets of Midtown Manhattan. So it took time for me to evolve, to get to a place where my appetite was bigger, where my ideas about photography, because this is an important thing to consider. Photography looks like pictures, but it's really ideas. And they're your ideas. And the ideas that you have are unique to you alone, and only you can help us to see them, because you figured out technically, emotionally, psychologically, physically, all these ways of being in the right place at the right time to make an interesting picture out of nothing. And nothing in this case is the everything of everyday life. Ordinary life is constantly charging the frame and you with new possibilities. So how you get there it's really up to you. I can tell you that these things are possible, but you have to go out and do the work yourself. And you bring that work back and we can talk about it or communicate in some way and help you get closer and closer to the things that you really care about. And this is true about the techniques of photography too. I don't really care much about the technical side of photography. I know how to use a camera. I know how to make the right exposures. I know how to choose the lens that I like to work with, and I think that's an important thing for all of you to consider too. What's your lens? What do you see? Do you see the world like this? That's a telephoto. Do you see the world like this? That's a wide angle. What's your personality like? Do you want to compress and flatten everything? Use a telephoto. You want to bring things far away, near? Use a telephoto. But if you want to plunge into the stream of the street, if you want to swim in there and be like a fish moving through the crowd, you need a lens that matches your vision. So what is our vision? The truth is that we, this human creature that we are, if I look straight ahead right at you now, I can feel my fingers wiggling right to here. Without moving my eyes, I can see this motion here. So that's 180 degrees. But I can't look at it unless I turn my head. So what do we see normally? Our vision is about 70 degrees. A 35 millimeter lens is 70 degrees. So if you're interested in photographing the world around you, as you enter it and as you perceive it, use a 35 millimeter lens. And forget about that zoom and in and out all the time. A 35 millimeter lens is your identity. It's the scope of the thing that you are interested in. So my most important technical advice to you is find a lens that suits your personality. And you may have more than one side to your personality. So maybe there is a telephoto in your future, but find something and stick with it. Don't keep on changing the lens all day long. I think sticking with one prime lens is a test of your discipline. It means you've got to make the picture by going closer or further away. You've got to stay alive to the meanings and possibilities of the world in front of you and what they're offering you. So trust me on this. I'm serious about it. You pick a lens that feels right to you. Or in fact, if the lens you're using makes you feel frustrated, like if you're using a 50, let's say, which is what happened to me when I was a young photographer. I was given a 50 on a camera I borrowed. I couldn't stand it. After a week, I felt so frustrated. I said, I got to get something bigger. And I went and bought a 35 millimeter lens, and my life changed. It's as if everything I was seeing, I was finally getting on the film. So technique is really simple. And in today's time, the other technique you need is Photoshop. And that's easy to learn. You do it by experimentation, and it will come clear to you, and you'll be able to make your pictures just as if you had a darkroom. You've got a virtual darkroom with Photoshop. Composition is anything you want to make of it, really. You've got a frame, you're going to fill it with the things that appeal to you. But you know, there's some funny things that people do early on. It's a way of helping establish your sense of what's important in a frame. So sometimes people do a picture within a picture, or you could say a frame within a frame. For example, here's a photograph that I made that's basically about a frame within a frame. It's a doorway in a building with another door in it, and then I put the frame around it. And really what was so interesting to me was that as I walked by this building, what I first noticed was a little square of blue, which was the sea. And the sunlight on the sand and the quality of the sky and the little cloud in the sky. And it struck me that the sea looked like a square. And the square was inside the rectangle of the door. And the door was inside the rectangle of the building. And the whole building was inside the rectangle of my camera. And I thought, oh, it's such an interesting way of entering the frame and going out the other side into the sunlight. And so the call to make this picture came in a very direct and persuasive manner. And I stood there and made the photograph and went on about my life. But it brings to mind that this is something to kind of stay open to, because photographs, when we look at them, should invite us in. They don't necessarily want to push us away. You want people to look at your photograph and enter into the moment that you responded so fully to. Because those are often poetic moments. A moment when your consciousness is so excited by where you are that you enter the space yourself and you record the entirety of the space. And that's what makes art. Your consciousness and your attention. So, another way of thinking about composition or space is to think about the beautiful chaos that we see in the world at large. I remember many years ago, I was walking past something in the countryside, and there was a chain link fence. And behind the fence was a great big hairy guy with his shirt off. And he was talking into a phone booth, a phone box on a telephone pole, not a phone booth, one of those emergency telephone boxes on a pole. So his head was covered. All I saw was a hairy body on a big guy with his head covered, and then layers of chain link fence and shadow coming through it. And the whole thing looked like somebody had taken a photograph of a man and then had erased it and crossed it out. And it was about complexity rather than simplicity. And I responded to it immediately. And yet, at that time, I was pretty young, and it was a kind of an odd thing for me to do. And when I showed that picture to John Charkovsky, who was the head of the Museum of Modern Art's photo department, he said, "Oh, I want to put that in an exhibition." And there I was, a young photographer, and I made a risky photograph. And someone who knew about photography thought it was interesting enough to hang in an exhibition. So you never know what chaos is going to bring to you. I'll show you. I have another photograph here that, in a way, is about the beauty of chaos. I was doing a commissioned work in St. Louis many years ago, and I was walking down the street, and I saw these 3 old buildings. The rest of the neighborhood had already fallen down. And there were these 3 old sort of limestone apartment buildings stuck to each other. And I thought, wow, they're so tender and tragic, and this whole neighborhood is falling apart, but they're still together. However, there were some trees in front of them. And as I looked at the building, I thought, these trees are like a screen over the building. I'm going to add them to the picture rather than working around and finding the position where there were no trees. And so I added a layer of density, a layer of complexity. And it was only for fun. I mean, I could have just walked around it and made another picture. But when I saw the result, it just felt absolutely right to me. And I think that's the way composing on the fly works. Something appears, you feel a gut response to it, and then you have an adjustment of your mind, should I or shouldn't I? I think you just should. If your first impression says, ooh, this is interesting, go with that. Because you must trust your instincts at every level of life. Your instincts are going to save you. They're going to help invent the persona that you want to project into the world because they're your instincts. They're not the guy standing next to you. So what you are as an instinctive human being, a creature, the human animal, is what you're going to photograph with. And I think you've got a great tool, a great asset right there. There's something else I'd like to add to your arsenal of tactics in terms of composition. And remember, composition is anything you want to make of it. But the world offers you lots of opportunities. And sometimes something comes up that you might want to keep in mind. I call it the freeze. Let me show you. I call it the freeze. Sometimes you're in a place and you know what a frieze is? A frieze is usually on top of the pediment of a building. It's lots of figures that are in Greek and Roman times, they would put a frieze on it. But a frieze is sometimes a whole bunch of people sitting on a bench, walking across the frame. They're in some kind of alignment and they form a frieze right in front of you, and behind them you can see the rest of the image. It's something to keep in mind. That's all I'm saying, is that opportunities present themselves, and you could say to yourself, oh, there's too many people, they're blocking the shot. Or you could say, all of these people in front of this place are adding a layer of interest to the scene behind. Because when you make the photograph, you will have both the layer in front and the space and the depth behind it. So it's important in thinking about composition to just remember that a photograph flattens space. A photograph is a two-dimensional object. We see three-dimensionally, but if you cover one eye, you will begin to see like a camera. You take away the third dimension. So it's important to act like a camera or see like a camera and And remember that the background and the foreground are all in relation to each other. That will give you plenty of opportunities to make photographs in which you bring these spaces up to the front plane, which is where the photograph happens. And you can do it with people, you can do it with landscape. These things are all interchangeable. And in fact, the frame within a frame and beautiful chaos and the frieze are all parts of the same puzzle that you work with when you walk around in ordinary life, whether it's the landscape or a city or the countryside or portraits, it's all a game. You know, there's one more consideration of what composition can do for you, and that is the portrait. I mean, what is a portrait? And who is it of? Those are legitimate questions, but let's just deal with the portrait. The portrait's of somebody you want to make a picture of. It could be a family member, it could be a stranger, it could be a group of people. How you go about a portrait is really up to you, but consider where the person is in the frame. And you bring them close to you. You leave a little space maybe for something in the background to be seen. You have them fill the frame. You turn the frame sideways so they could appear on one side and there's emptiness over here. Or you bring a bunch of people in so they pack the frame. It's a live consideration happening in the moment, and really as inventive and playful as you can be when you're dealing with a portrait is part of the pleasure of making photographs. Come in really tight. Maybe you start tight so that you're just dealing with eyes, nose, and mouth. And then you pull away for the whole head. And then you pull away for half a figure. And then you pull away so it's the whole figure. And then it's the figure small in the space with a lot of space around them. It's rich with possibilities. So I urge you, when you're in any of these situations, feel playful. Don't allow yourself to become rigid and fixed in a way where you tie yourself down. Photography is an endless stream of click, 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 click. You can make as many pictures as you want, and you make it on the revelation that you have, that your instincts are driving you. Go in close, pull over to the side. If you listen to that little Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder, if you remember Pinocchio, you'll have somebody giving you a kind of whisper in the ear, do this, try that. And it makes it much more fun. And after all, living is fun, seeing is fun, and making photographs is really the most incredible enjoyment you can have as a passionate pastime. Siena! Look where we are. Look at this fantastic place. There'll be street photography, there'll be action between people. I'll try to meld in with the crowd. I'm going to show you the tactics I use to kind of become invisible on the street. And sometimes I may even talk to people because it's fun to talk to other people. So watch what I do. Let's have some fun. This is a wonderful street in Siena where people are coming from that side and they're coming from up there and they're coming. It's a crossroads in a way. And I love to stand on a crossroads. When I'm there, the mix of people and energy helps me to be invisible, but also keeps on bringing me new information all the time. So I see new people and new combinations. Here's a girl talking on her cell phone, but she's also got her water bottle in her mouth. And the two together make a kind of crazy picture. See, I'm always looking for the light too. There's a beautiful patch of light here, and people come in through the light, and for a moment, they're visible and they're highly lit. So I'm kind of interested in the shadows of the street and the light that people are entering, because for a moment, they're like sparks flying. Here's a lady with orange hair in the sunlight now. Bingo! The orange hair lit up like a flame. Sometimes, in the great big mix of the crowd, there's a little detail. Could be a miserable kid crying, "Mom, I want my ice cream," whatever it is. So I'm looking for the little human detail in the larger environment, which is a great way of saying, look, in ordinary life, it all seems to be going on in a normal way, but in fact, there's fatigue and pain and unhappiness and joy and laughter. So it's an incredible mix. But you train your eye to look at the whole thing and see some of these details that pull things together. Because as soon as you see a detail of, let's say, a kid holding onto their mother's hand and crying, right over here is a guy with two poodles, and the poodles are up on their hind legs and they're looking for a cookie. So by being attentive to one thing, you can include the other things in it. That's part of what makes street photography so interesting. I'm hanging out near these guys because they've got big hand gestures, a nice little cluster of Italian guys. But I'm also watching who else is coming into the space to see if something interesting. And I know behind me is a bulldog over there, so I'm waiting to see what's going to happen with this bulldog and these guys and whoever else is coming my way. Ah, you see that? All those gestures. Bellissimo, bellissimo. Can't expect to have a great event fall from the sky in front of you every time you come out. But building on the little events, putting things together that don't belong together, is how you make interesting photographs and how you kind of tune up your instrument on the street. This book changed my life. I'm sure all of you hope that someday your work will be in a book too. And it took me 15 years to get to making this book. And it came to me because I was going through a change in my work. I needed to move away from the small camera, 35mm camera on the street, to a larger format camera. In this case, an 8x10-inch wooden deered-off camera. I wanted all the detail that camera could deliver, the photographic detail. And so I made a switch, but a large format camera doesn't work so well in a city. So I took myself to Cape Cod, not very far from New York, probably 4.5, 5 hours drive from New York City. And one of the lessons is that you don't have to go to an exotic place far away, halfway across the world, to make a change in your life. You can do it almost locally, as long as you're open to the things that you could learn. And as long as you have questions that are challenging questions. And my question was, how could I photograph in color and get as much information packed into the frame so that I could make large prints? So I had to give up working on the streets of Manhattan or any other large city where energy and the kind of jazz riff was the subject of my work, and somehow work in a slow and quiet atmosphere of Cape Cod, where the subjects were completely different. I found myself photographing architecture and seascapes and sunlight or portraits. And over time, these things developed in a way that it completely surprised me. I think one of the lessons for everyone to take from this kind of change is that when you accept a challenge, and acceptance is really a great part of everybody's growth. When you accept that challenge, you have an opportunity to reinvent yourself and to see the world in a fresh way. One of the very first things I discovered was that a large format camera sees into the oncoming darkness. It's as if time adds light to the photograph. And I found myself struck by how beautiful the dusk hour was and how this big camera could stand there like a faithful partner and look into the oncoming darkness and show me all the information that was in there. And so I began to make photographs of very simple things, houses by the beach or porches in the evening, or sometimes just a pole with a light on it, or a telephone booth with a glowing light in it. Telephone booths, they used to exist in our lives before the cell phone. Anyway, it was one of those challenges that once you rise to, you begin to see new possibilities. And I developed a whole body of work that I call Between the Dog and the Wolf. And that's a French expression, entre chien et loup, between dog and wolf, which really means between the known and the unknown, or the tame and the wild. And somehow that blue hour suggests to all of us a little bit, sometimes it's a little scary. Remember those Walt Disney movies where it gets dark and the trees seem to have spirit and they threaten you a little bit? Well, that blue hour offers that kind of ambiguous sense of what's going on here. So I started to make these pictures and I realized I'm developing a whole new body of work. And then after a while, carrying a large camera around, people would see me. And suddenly the invisibility I had on the streets of New York was blown. My cover was blown. And people would say to me, "Hey, why are you using that big camera?" And as soon as I tried to explain it, I realized I was looking at them and I was dumbstruck. Wow, how beautiful is she? Or how interesting is his skin coloring and his curly hair, or the clothing they were wearing and how they fit in their clothes. Suddenly human beings as individuals became powerful for me. And I found myself making portraits. So you can go from one thing to another with a kind of slow evolution. You just have to trust that this evolution is important to you because you're going through it. It's a kind of transition or a growth spurt, call it what you will. It happens to every one of us if we just give ourselves the room to develop that kind of openness about our work. There was a period where I found myself stunned by the simple fact of sunlight sliding across the surface of a building. And I remember that the great American painter, Edward Hopper, once was asked, well, what are you really painting? What's your subject? And he answered, I'm painting sunlight on the sides of houses. What a simple thing to say. But when you really take that in, you realize he's saying simple things have profound effect on us if we just give ourselves over to them. So by doing that, and by accumulating a variety of things, I was able to make enough work to gather them together into a book. And this book, Cape Light, has served me incredibly well over the years. As I served photography as a medium that I believed in, as a medium that would give me messages from the world at large and from my instincts, so this book has served me and given me a way of going forward, a way of finding myself once again through the means of photography and developing other bodies of work and other books. And I know that every one of you hopes that someday you're going to accumulate enough work of consequence, work that you really believe in, that you could then find a rhythm for, a form for, that will develop into a book. And I urge you to follow your instincts and believe in yourself that much. Because really, each of us as an individual can make work that speaks to everybody else. It's the universal language. That's what photography has become. We're all speaking in images now. And we learn to read all of our companions' work as we live on this planet, whether you're in America or China or Great Britain or Africa, you're making images about the world you live in. And we understand these images. They come to us with all of their power intact. And the only way you can do this is by being persistent, believing in the work that you're doing, trying to increase the quality of your work and your commitment and connection to it. Really, this talk we're having now is about believing enough in yourself so that the work that you draw into yourself can ultimately come out again in a new form. And all of us can see who you are through the mute, silent power of photographs. Let me try and show you something. Look at this. This is 5 photographs of a very simple subject. It's the bay and the sky with a horizon line in the middle. When I was making these photographs, I was really living in one place right on the water. And every day I faced the same place. Water below, sky above, line in the middle. But every single day was different, no matter how constant the horizon line was. I was seeing weather systems, change of light, a slow shift in the seasons, winds and storms coming through. Things were constantly shifting, even though the basic place itself was exactly the same. And I found myself making a record, really a simple record, not a complicated strategy for anything, but the simple record of the local beauty of a single place. If you look at it day after day after day, it doesn't get boring. It actually becomes more and more interesting because you begin to see more. It's almost as if after the first 2 or 3 pictures, you strip away some blindness that you have, or some prejudice even about making these kinds of pictures. And you get into the rhythm, the cycle of seasons and weather of a place where you're spending time. And that sense of familiarity gives you a confidence that allows you to go deeper into it. And at a certain point with these pictures, and the cover of the book is actually one of these pictures. These pictures seem to me to be like paint chips. When you go to the paint store and you pick out a blue and a blue-gray and a blue-gray greenish slightly and a blue-gray lavender a little bit, and you keep on finding the subtle changes in these tones. So I thought of these things humorously and to myself as sort of paint chips that nature is developing just for me. And by doing that, I learned something about the color vocabulary of film and light and my own interests. So there's lots to learn. That's part of the joy of photography, is it's always giving you lessons, even if you think you know it all. And sometimes we do, and then we get surprised and realize, oh, how did I miss that? How did I miss that message? So use photography as a lever to lift up the weight that you sometimes bring on your own work, because we all get in our own way. But photography holds the secret message of how to get out of the trap we paint ourselves into, the corner. How to get out of the corner we paint ourselves into. It's really important to be open to your own behavior and what the world is telling you. There's a mix there, and it's really all in your hands.